Now, the passage that we're about to start here this evening is not the first time that we've seen sadness within the church. We definitely saw a sad account with the account of Ananias and Sapphira. But this account is sad for a completely different reason. We see sorrow there in that account because of the sin and really just the foolishness that caused that, the unnecessary sin. Not that any sin is necessary, but I think you understand what I'm saying, that those things just didn't have to be. And so it was so sad to see Christians, especially right there at the beginning of the church, fall in such a way. But here we see sadness as this is the first martyr. We're about to see the first person to lose their life in a sense, in a direct fulfillment and answer to what Jesus says, that we must be willing to take up our cross and follow after him. Now, to us today, that passage takes on a different meaning where we make it trivial things of this life, that that's just a cross I've got to bear. But under the first century, those that were surrounded by the Romans, those that had witnessed crucifixion and seen the criminals hanging on the tree outside the city, take up your cross meant this, that you would be willing to give your life for the cause of Christ. And so here we see Stephen being willing to do just that. And Brother Bobby has said throughout this lesson and in others that Christians are being prepared for something. Something's coming that they're being prepared for. They need strength. They need a foundation. Well, this is what they're being prepared for. Their foundation is about to be shaken. And as with anything, we want to make sure that our foundation is built strong enough and our structure is built strong enough so that when the earthquake does come, or like with Jesus, the story of the wise and the foolish man building the house on the rock and building the house on the sand, what's going to stand? Peter's going to say in 1 Corinthians about the trial by fire. What are our works going to do? Are they going to stand at the end in the trial by fire? They build of gold and silver, hay and stubble. And so that's what we're about to see here too, is the church is about to be put through what we might call the crucible. We're about to burn out the impurities. We're about to see exactly how strong these are. And it's encouraging, kind of the spoiler alert, if you will. In chapter 8, we see that they go everywhere from Jerusalem preaching the gospel. Brother Bobby?
And what's so interesting about chapter 7, and I'll comment on that but just a little bit as kind of an opening on it, then I want to back up a few verses in chapter 6. Had a few comments to make on that. One of the things as we get into this, I want you to think about what's going on here. I want you to ask yourself a question, and then of course as we get through it, I think it's going to become pretty evident. Who wound up being on trial here? Stephen or the Sanhedrin? It's kind of interesting when you look at it. They think Stephen's on trial. In turn, we find out, as Jeremy said, they're on trial. And so we find that preaching of the gospel does that. It tries the works of men. And you can say what Stephen did here. He preached the gospel, but he done it in a way that Jesus has had to do and others has had to do. He basically went back to the beginning and brought them forward. That's how far off base they had gotten. Basically, he started, I'm going to use Abraham here, and that's where he did start at. He started at the very foundation of the lineage of their people and brought them forward. Of course, Jesus in Matthew 19, he went all the way back to the beginning, didn't he? And we find this used throughout the Bible. And that's the way you have to do sometimes when you're teaching people on an individual basis. Sometimes you have to go all the way back to the beginning so they can see where they're at now in the present time. And so that's not uncommon. We said, as we said here, who turned who and who's on trial where? Okay? That's what you have to ask yourself with this. A few comments that I wanted to make about the Libertinians that stirred up the people and the elders about Stephen's teaching to them. It was kind of interesting about them setting up in Acts chapter 6 And somewhere around verse 10, 12, you can start there. False witnesses. Well, that's a lesson to us too in itself. Men's doctrine cannot stand in the face of truth. So what do you have to do? You have to either acknowledge that is the truth, or you have to set up some way to disacknowledge or combat the truth. Well, what are you going to use to go against the truth? There's not but one other thing, is there? That's falsehoods, isn't it? And yet it's interesting at the way they use the falsehood. And we're going to turn to Romans 10:13 and see how that falsehood is even used today, how it's turned around. Notice what it says here when they set up these false witnesses. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth shall destroy this place. Well, what is this place? The temple. Okay? We've heard it said that Jesus is going to destroy this place and that he was going to change the customs which Moses delivered to us. Now, what is he talking about there? The temple of the law. Okay. True statement or false statement? True statement. How did it become false? They misapplied it, they misconstrued it, and they turned it around. That's all they could do with it. They couldn't rebut facts against it, so you had to set up falsehoods to try to prove your point. You see, Jesus was going to destroy the temple. He was going to change the law of Moses into the law of grace and truth. But it was going to be for their benefit and for the benefit of the Gentiles and the entire world. In other words, they missed the whole point. They missed the whole point. Because of what they had been instructed in their lives down through the years. Really, they should have known better. Okay? But they didn't. They had preconceived notions and doctrines set up in their minds. You say, Bobby, what's that got to do with Romans chapter 10 and verse 13? The same thing. I'm going to read that verse to you, then I'm going to ask you a question. Romans 10:13. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. True statement or false? It's a true statement. Okay, how does it become false? How does it become not true? Misapplied, misunderstood, mistaught. All you got to do based on this statement is believe and call on the Lord's name. Don't matter where you're at. You can be on the creek bank, and if you have that feeling, Lord save me, well, you're saved. You're signed, sealed, and delivered. Is that what this statement says? Well, no. It's taken out of context. It's misapplied. You have to set up something against it to try to prove your point. So what is the setting about this statement? How then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? He's talking about the need of those to go and preach the gospel so people can have the opportunity to believe. And of course we know that, as we studied before, the word believe dictates what? Action. Example. Well, Con, you go out there and you got a flat on your truck, what you got to do?
You got to do something.
Yeah, you got to get the jack out, ain't you?
You let it stay like it is.
That's what I'm saying. All right. Now you can stand there all day long until the cows come home. That tire's flat. I believe that tire's flat. Y'all, that tire's flat. I believe that tire's flat.
I'll tell you what I use.
But
I say to myself, I believe that I'm going to go to Montgomery today. But until I go, I ain't done nothing.
that's my point. Until you get that jack out, what that tire gonna stay? It's gonna stay flat, ain't it?
Yeah.
So you got to do something. We don't have a problem with the belief word in any aspect of life that I know of. Now, Red, you may know another one that I know of except one. When it comes to religion, it's dormant. That's amazing, isn't it? And so we see the way they've done this and the way they're going to do Stephen is not unusual. And I just wanted to kind of touch on that because it's things that you're going to run into out in the world. They'll make a true statement, but then they try to back it up in a manipulative manner with falsehoods. You know? Read.
I want to add one passage to what Brother Bobby was talking about earlier with going back to the beginning. That's what the congregation at Ephesus was recommended in Revelation 2 And verse 2, I know your works, your toil, your patient endurance, how you cannot bear with those who are evil, and have tested those who have called themselves apostles and are not, and found them to be false. I know you are enduring patiently and bearing up for my name's sake, and you have not grown weary. All that sounds great. All that sounds good, but I have this against you. You have abandoned your first love. Remember, therefore, from where you have fallen, repent and do the works that you did at first. If not, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place unless you repent. So again, there, it was going back to the beginning, going back to what you have first known, what has first been preached. I want to focus in on one word over here to Acts chapter 6. And we see this idea of the customs that Moses delivered to us. The customs that Moses delivered, this long-established usage or practice common to a group. The dictionary, Oxford Dictionary translates it as the characteristic spirit of a culture, era, or community as manifested in its beliefs or aspirations. So this, and the word we use today is ethos. The ethos, kind of just the mindset, right. The culture, the characteristics, the defining characteristics of a person or a group. And that's what they're saying here is that he's going to change everything that we stand for. Everything that defines us as the people of God, he wants to change. And these customs that Moses delivered to us. But notice there, this long-established usage. Oftentimes, isn't that the excuse that's given to not follow the truth? Is, well, I've always done it this way. Or my family has always done this. We've always believed this. Or for so long, this has been the case. And we look upon long-established practice. And sometimes that is good. You know, we are encouraged is it Jeremiah? I'm wanting to say 6 and verse 6, to ask for the old paths, to follow the old ways. Aren't we told in Galatians that the old law was the things that were written before time were written for our learning? So, you know, in a sense, these customs, these traditions can be good, but not when they contradict the law of God. And kind of what Brother Bobby was saying as well, this misapplication, these long-established customs that Moses had given them and they had been passed down were really misapplied to the day, misapplied to the people. If they had been applied properly, then none of this would have been a problem. They would have seen that Jesus Christ was the Messiah. They would have recognized that he fulfilled all of the prophecies. But there's a problem there. From Mount Sinai, 2 laws were given. There was the written law that was given, and then there was the oral law that was given. And that was passed down by tradition from father to son and father to son and generation after generation after generation. And this is what we're looking at with the Pharisees and such, how, you know, you're only able to tie a square knot on the Sabbath day, and if you tie a knot with extra folds in it, well, then you've broken the Sabbath day. You're only able to travel so far. You're only able to do none of that came from the written law from God. That came from traditions that were passed down. And so that's really the problem that we're looking at here is we're not even wanting to change the customs that Moses delivered. They're not even thinking about what they're worried about is not even what Moses had delivered. Yes, Jesus wants to change the customs. He wants to convert those over into a spiritual kingdom. But these customs did not come from God. Brother Jeremy?
Say with Moses you get the 10 Commandments, but also there's 613 count 10 Commandments for his rules in the Old Testament.
Right.
But then also with them you have to count, are you Pharisee, or are you Sadducee, and are you Zealot, and all these other things. So it was just convoluted. And a lot of it, like you're saying, they're not looking at the truth, they're looking at tradition, they're looking at holding on to things that exalt them, give them power, or what they're comfortable with, and not wanting to seek the truth.
What is it that Jesus says? In vain do these people worship me. Their hearts are far from me. They teach his commandments, the traditions of men. And that's what we're looking at here, is that, yes, Jesus is going to destroy the temple. Yes, he's going to change the customs, but not the customs that they're accustomed to. Not the things that have defined them for several hundred years and even thousands of years down through this time. They've gotten to the point where they're so far away from the true Word of God that they're no longer the people of God. Brother Bob?
Yeah, and you went into it a whole lot deeper than I ever even thought about going into it. That's good. That's absolutely right. They just couldn't stand it, could they? But yet it's true. It was a true statement, but misapplied. And you find that with a lot of scripture a lot of times. You know, you can be talking to somebody and they'll be talking about scripture and things of that nature, and then, you know, it seems like they're on the right track, and then wham, bam, and shut the door all of a sudden. Out of the blue, they misapplied everything they just said. You know, to try to justify, we'll just say some custom. How about that? Okay? And that's true. And that's really all I had to say on that. You want me to say a few words and go into chapter 7?
Take it away.
Here in chapter 7, we find that Stephen now has been called before the Sanhedrin, and the high priest in verse 1, and then I'll read a few verses, he asked a very interesting question, and we've heard this before. We've heard these men say these things. Are these things so? That's another way of saying, and I think, Reed, you brought that out here a few weeks ago. That's our way of saying, are you guilty or not? It's kind of like you go into our courtroom, one of the first things that the judge wants you to acknowledge before the trial starts, how do you plead? Guilty or not guilty? And so we find they just want a cut and dry answer to it. And I'm going to read verses 2 and 3. And he said, Men, brethren, fathers, hearken, the God of our glory appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran. And he said unto him, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and come unto the land which I shall show thee. So he picks up right here with Abraham. You know, as you read down through this, of course, we went through this in Genesis, and this is like a condensed version of the events that we've been covering in Genesis. And so, you know, I was sitting here going, well, okay, we've all went through this, and Stephen does a good job of compacting many Sunday mornings and some Wednesday nights. He condensed it way on down, didn't he? But he got the point across. Right. He got the point across, because everything he said is true. So really, what Stephen is doing here, he's bringing them forward. Now, wait a minute, guys. Y'all remember our father Abraham. And we already run into where they took a great stone believing we are the children of Abraham and we've done no sin. Well, that wasn't true either. Because when you go back, we're finding the patriarchs of old throughout their lineage, they had their own set of problems, didn't they? And we're going to get into another big one Sunday with Judah, through which Christ came. Okay? So the whole thing they had just all balled up. So what Stephen's trying to do is paint a clearer picture. You know, God told him to get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and come into the land which I shall show thee. Really what God had told Abraham to do is separate himself. In order for me to use you like I need to use you, I got to get you out of that environment. I got to get you away from those things. Jeremy?
I'd say also when you look at this, it also shows them, if you look at Abraham, where is the temple at this time? Where is this law that you say, it wasn't there?
It wasn't there.
But Abraham was doing what? He was listening to God, and obeying God, and serving God, and pleasing to God. And they have all this, and they still can't get it right.
That's amazing, isn't it? You know? And that's why Stephen went there, just like what you said. They had all this. They knew this. Let's phrase it this way. They probably knowed it. They just didn't do it. You know? Other things were more important and took precedent over it, so there's probably a whole lot of Jewish loopholes within that thought pattern, and that's why he went there. But he did tell him to get out of that country and from thy kindred. And you know, it takes a separation sometimes for that to happen, to be pulled out of one environment to go into another environment. And you see things a lot of times different. You see things clearer. Maybe in the environment you were in, you always was told this, that, and the other, and this and that, and that. And you step over into the other environment, you find out, well, wait a minute, it's not really that way at all, you know? But the other consideration here, you got to remember the gross idolatry that was present there too. So this was all new. This was happening real time. So Abraham had to get away so he could be attentive when God spoke. So his mind wouldn't be cluttered up with things. And I use kind of an example of a person from up the country where I'm at. The family does not have a very good reputation. So one of the boys, when he got older, he left from around here and went to Washington State. Stayed gone for years and years. And he came back, and just so happens Daddy seen him, and we went down there and saw him. He was back home visiting after years and years. And Daddy was talking to him, and he became a very successful person, a very respected businessman, so on and so forth. And we were just flat amazed. And Daddy said, that's just amazing at how that worked out. He said, you know, Bob, if I hadn't gotten away, it never would have happened. So he had to separate himself, because all anybody else knew about him was what they seen him from that point forward, right? And he was successful at it. So it does take a separation sometimes to get us to see things, to get us in the right direction, to get us in the right way. And so, you know, we find that he told him that. He did come to the land eventually. He showed him that his descendants was going to inherit that land and things of that nature. So those events did happen, and they should have known it. Go ahead, Rick.
Right, they should have known, and you said something earlier about they maybe did know, they just didn't really apply it. Paul acknowledges that. I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. You know, they did want to serve God. They did want to be the children of God. They did, you know, they were very proud of the fact that they were the children of God. But that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. No matter how good of a person we are, no matter how zealous of a Christian we are, if we're not in the truth, we're not in the truth. There is only one truth. So, the high priest, are these things so? Like Brother Bobby said, this is kind of a, how do you plead? What is your defense? This is the chance that Stephen has to make a defense. This is kind of Stephen's moment here. He's got a choice at this point. Do I back down off of this, or do I charge forward? Do I charge ahead? And that's really what we see him doing, just like the others did. Is like Peter and John, when they were in this same situation, they kind of shut things down and said, now listen to this. We're going to do what we know we've got to do. Whether you are okay with that or not is something different, but we've got to obey God rather than obey man. And so Stephen, being full of the Spirit, is kind of in the same situation here. Brothers and fathers, hear me. Hear what I have to say. Hear this. But I love his opening to it there. You know, he's got to know something bad is about to happen here. Yeah. He's got to know, and you know, he's already got these false witnesses and these liars that are coming up against him and bringing these blasphemous charges against him. But notice the respect still that he has here for them. It kind of set me back a little bit when I first went into Guyana, and some of the younger children, I was talking with them, they would call you Uncle so-and-so. And the older men were called father, and if they were really old, sometimes they would call them grandfather or some variation of it. And that I know that's the same way in like an Asian culture as well. An older man would sometimes be called grandfather or something like that. So we see Stephen using those familiar, respectful titles for these individuals. Brothers and fathers, hear me. Listen to what I have to say. Even though you've been lying about me, even though you've brought these false charges, even though I know that something bad may be about to happen here, still going to be respectful. Still going to, I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to say the proper things. Brother Jeremy, you had a comment?
I was going to say, it's unfortunate that they cased it up like they did, and really, there was no way to answer that question. It was almost like, when did you stop beating your wife question. And you have to answer yes or no.
Right.
And then, so what he did is he answered the question that should have been asked, and I think that was probably the better approach.
Yeah.
So he tackled it the way it should be, starting with Abraham, and he's going to run history for him.
Right. There really wasn't an answer that he could give that would get him out of this situation. A truthful answer that he could give that would get him out of this situation, no matter which way he went with it. And like you said, this is the wise answer, to try to appeal to their nationality, to their patriotic side, that yes, you are the children of God. Yes, Moses did give us these customs. Yes, we did have this temple. But let's look at the history and let's bring this forward and see what God has been accomplishing. And if we are honest with ourselves, can we not look back over our own history and see the works that God has done in our lives? See the providence that God has done in the way that we moved and the things that we've done and the decisions we made and how these things have worked out in our favor, or even we've learned lessons and things that didn't work out in our favor. We can see the hand of God all the way down through, and I think that's what Stephen is doing here too, is he's definitely showing that God has been directing our history as a nation to this point. God has been bringing us down to this situation here. Brother Bobby?
I can't help but to think of a cousin of mine that was a gospel preacher in the 60s and 70s, along with, his name was Raymond Rucker. There was O.B. Porterfield, Brother Con, some of y'all remember them. Raymond run meetings down here at County Line. Raymond Rucker.
Rucker,
Yeah, Raymond Rucker.
I remember.
Yeah. And I remember he was from out in the community where I'm from, okay? And I often wanted to talk to him, so he was running a gospel meeting here at County Line. And so he came to the house, and I got a chance to talk to him real good, and I asked him some things that were said that's still in the community to that day, okay? And he said, Bobby, I never said all that. I never said anything like that. He said, I had a problem with teaching people. I'd go into homes and teach, and people would come to church and I'd teach them. They'd go ask the denominational preacher, and he would turn it around on me. So I think about that, so in a sense.
Argue with him and Alvin Ross used to have arguments over standing forward in Axel.
Yeah.
And they tell me about it. I listen to it, see what all they say.
Oh, yeah.
But at the time he preached that gospel sermon, he was a minister over yonder at, going east toward Georgia on the left over there. I think somewhere in the
It's over around Valley.
Opelika area.
Yeah, Valley, Opelika, it was one of those areas. Yeah, he was all over.
From Opelika.
Yeah.
There's a little church building sitting on the left-hand side of the road. He was the preacher there at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, old Raymond preached. I tell you, he preached sermons you could raise your hair.
Yep. Joe Coos.
Sure did now.
Joe Coos.
You don't get no preaching like that no more. But that's what Stephen's doing right here.
Right. That's.
He's showing you how he sets up his own defense. But at the same time, he's setting up a defense. If you'll notice, when you read them there in the next few seconds, a few minutes, verses 7, 8, and 9, those three verses covers a long period of time. Then he jumps all the way down there in 10 and goes to talk about what the patriarchs did when they sold Joseph into Egypt. But all the time it took to have Isaac born, and Isaac come in the world, Isaac brought Jacob, and Esau in the world, and then Jacob brought all 12 sons in the world and made up the house of Israel. All that transferred in verses 7, 8, and 9. In the time frame. I know I figured you'd bring all that out when you get to it.
Yeah.
But I just thought to me, now that was very interesting. to me, showing me that God don't get in no hurry. Now, another man, I told y'all this before, but I'll tell you again. That man come down here from Riverside Church in Tennessee, parked his mobile home out there, him and his wife, and spent 2 weeks here teaching us memory work, memory.
Was that Brother Savage?
Huh?
Brother Savage?
Savage, yeah. Was you here at that time?
I was, yeah.
Well, you remember, well, I got a certificate and so did Pauline. I don't know whether you didn't get one or not, I guess you didn't, because as far as I know, we're supposed to have been the only two that got that certificate of being able to answer all the questions when you
Right.
begin to ask them. We covered some 200 and something, I believe it was between 225 and 250 things that we had committed to memory. And one of them was every chapter in this book of Acts. We had to be able to quote something, the main event of what took place in every chapter, from chapter 1 to chapter 28 or 29, how many is there? I think it's 28. But anyway, so much for all of that. But I'm going to tell you the point I was making, I never made it. The point was I was up there trying to do something to help out because he had told me to get up there, and I got up there right where he's standing now. It wasn't up in the pulpit out down here. And I began to go with it, because I was full of it at that time. He said, wait just a minute now. Wait a minute there, Brother Collins says, God don't move in a hurry. His wheel turns like he's done his wheel turns real slow. So I thought I'd just make that point right here now, because that's exactly what's going on in what we're studying right here tonight. How slow God works. He does work slow, but he accomplishes his purpose. We got to be able to see it like Reed just made a statement there a while ago, and it applies to us today. Whether or not Acts 8 and 28 becomes alive in our mind and thoughts each day, it should come alive, Then we know, it ain't a matter of guess, it's a matter of know. We know that all things work together for good to them that love God and called according to his purpose. We know it. And he's the same God today that he was back that day. I am the eternal and I change not. He don't change.
We want to pick up at 7:1 next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't intend to take up that,
That's perfectly fine.
but it's
Good
something to
comments.
think about.
Oh,
Right.
yeah, it's good.
Something to feed the inner man with.
Let's go ahead and pick up at the beginning of chapter 7 next week. Your time has gotten as